You ever get that sense when you wake up on a Monday morning and something just isn't right? That was me last week. I sat at my desk in the translation department, sipping lukewarm coffee from my chipped Queen of Syntax mug, watching the seconds drag themselves across my screen while the morning refused to move. The entire floor carried a strange undercurrent, like anticipation knotted together with dread. It hadn't come out of nowhere. It started 3 weeks earlier, the day the company announced we were getting a new CEO. I barely reacted at first. Grace in manufacturing had cycled through leadership often enough that change had become background noise. But the moment Marcus Bell walked through the glass doors, I felt it in my bones. Something was off, and not in a subtle way. He was late to his own introduction meeting, not fashionably late, 15 full minutes after the board chair had already forced applause and welcoming remarks into the room. Marcus strolled in like the delay itself was proof of importance, wrapped in expensive cologne and something sharper underneath. I've always had a good nose. There was alcohol there, not the faint trace of last night's wine, but the poorly disguised edge of liquid confidence. He didn't really smile, not sincerely. His face was all angles and rehearsed smirks, the kind that belonged to men who threw around phrases like synergize global directionality and believed that saying them made them true. On his second day, he tried to restructure the International Accounts Division and promptly revealed he didn't know which markets we actually served. He called our South Korea liaison the guy from Singapore, right in front of everyone. The silence afterward was excruciating. But ignorance wasn't the worst part. It was the contempt. Meetings were treated like inconveniences, people like outdated equipment. He didn't ask questions, he issued decrees, most of them poorly thought out. And there I was, Mary Cooper, 17 years with the company. On paper, my job was straightforward. I handled translations for global clients, especially sensitive presentations and contracts where a single misstep could collapse a deal. In reality, I was a bridge. I spoke 5 languages fluently and read subtext the way other people read profit margins. I'd helped close deals that funded entire departments. Lately, though, I might as well have been furniture. Marcus never met my eyes, never asked what I did, never attended a foreign client meeting. At the last roundtable, he cut my update short so he could ask marketing about font choices. That should have been my warning. Something about his clipped tone and sudden obsession with streamlining resources settled cold in my chest. I'd seen this pattern before, executives with immaculate resumes and no understanding of the trenches sweeping in with cost-cutting mandates. But trust doesn't show up on spreadsheets. Cultural nuance doesn't fit into a metric. You don't replace decades of relationship building with automated tools. Still, I stayed quiet, kept working. Part of me believed professionalism would be enough. I didn't yet realize the storm was already breaking, or how far Marcus Bell's arrogance would push things. Wednesdays started normally enough. I was trying to steal a few calm minutes to prep notes for an upcoming client call, headset on, half listening to a French training webinar when I noticed movement near the corridor. A new face, red heels clicking with confidence that didn't belong to the building, lipstick too bold for the gray walls. She walked like the place owed her something. No badge, no hesitation, just a quick scan of the room and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "This is Lana," someone from HR chirped, appearing like a nervous chaperone. "She's joining us as our new SEO specialist." Lana waved, then dropped into the desk 2 spaces down from mine, Rebecca's old one. Rebecca had left 2 weeks earlier, burned out by endless campaigns and Marcus's obsession with aggressive visibility. I turned back to my work. I had deadlines, Japanese translations, a 10 o'clock meeting. I didn't have time for small talk, but Lana did. Loud phone calls on speaker, comments about organic reach and escaping garbage agencies. Her voice sliced through the room. I glanced at her. She didn't notice. By 9, she was commenting on my screen. "You don't use Grammarly? Brave." I smiled tightly. "I've been writing in 5 languages since before Grammarly existed." She smirked. "AI can't be that bad." It wasn't insulting so much as revealing. Then came the moment that shifted everything. At 9:32, we filed into the small conference room for our weekly strategy sync. I took my usual seat by the window. Lana stopped behind me and said, just loud enough, "Oh, this must be the lifetime employee corner." A few laughs. I didn't react. "Good morning, Lana." She blinked, smiled wide, and asked how many people I'd seen come and go. I opened my laptop. She sat too close, whispered questions, comments about Google Translate. Her hand brushed my arm and lingered. The room felt colder. This wasn't joking, it was probing, testing. Marcus was late again. When he arrived, he wasted no time. We need to cut deeper, non-core roles. Lana raised her hand and talked about automation and AI efficiencies. She turned to me, smiling, and dismissed translation as obsolete. Marcus nodded. Google Translate can handle it. I didn't move. I stood, calmly, closed my tablet, and said, "I understand." I wished them luck. I walked out. They didn't stop me. They didn't realize what they'd just done. I didn't immediately leave. I should have, but the frustration followed me into the hallway, sharp and clarifying. So I turned back. I walked into the room where Marcus was already moving on, and Lana was tapping at her phone like she hadn't just erased nearly 20 years of trust in 5 minutes. "Wait," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You need to understand something." Marcus glanced up, mildly irritated. "Mary?" "I'm not just a translator," I said. "I'm the liaison for our international partners. I've built direct lines of communication with our clients in Japan, Germany, Argentina, and South Korea. I'm not giving them text, I'm giving them us, context, nuance, relationships." Lana rolled her eyes. "We have CRM data and language tools for that." "No, you don't understand," I replied, forcing myself to stay calm. "It's not about words, it's about trust. Some of these clients won't speak to anyone else. They don't sign anything without me in the room. I've spent years building those bridges." Marcus leaned back in his chair like I'd interrupted his favorite show. "Mary, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're not irreplaceable. No one is." "I'm not saying I'm irreplaceable," I said, my voice shaking just slightly. "I'm saying you're removing the only person who understands how these partners think, how they negotiate. They won't respond to Google Translate. They won't respond to cold emails or flashy dashboards. They'll go silent and you won't even notice it happening." Lana let out a short laugh. "Wow, confident aren't we?" Marcus nodded, almost patronizing. "You're clearly emotionally attached to your role, but this isn't personal. It's just business. You may be overestimating your importance, Mary." Overestimating. That word hit harder than I expected. As if the years I spent working late nights learning cultural idioms, perfecting honorifics, and refining contract language until every clause was airtight meant nothing. As if I were just a sentimental employee clinging to an obsolete role. They saw me as a line item, and now they were deleting the line. I stood there, heart pounding, wanting to scream the truth into their blind, self-satisfied faces. But I didn't, because something else clicked in that moment. You can't explain fluency to people who only speak in buzzwords, so I nodded once and walked out. They had no idea what they had just discarded, but they would soon enough. The first few hours were the hardest. I walked home slower than usual, my bag feeling strangely weightless, like even it knew I no longer belonged to something. The sun was still up, but everything looked flat, washed out, like someone had drained the color from the world. When I finally stepped inside, the silence of my apartment hit me like a slap. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and just stood there. No buzzing work phone, no emails, no calendar alerts reminding me of partner follow-ups. Just stillness. I sat on the couch and stared out the window, arms wrapped tightly around myself like I was trying to hold all those years together. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to call them. Marcus, Lana, HR, anyone, to explain one more time, to make them understand that I wasn't just a cog in the machine. But the truth was, a louder part of me didn't want to give them that satisfaction, so I sat there and wondered, could they really function without me? Could Marcus, with his copy-paste confidence and buzzword bingo, navigate the subtle power plays of our South Korean suppliers? Could Lana explain the delicate honor culture our Tokyo partners insisted on preserving in every line of a contract? Could Google Translate warn them when a single misplaced pronoun could quietly kill $1 million deal? Could a machine read the pause before a sentence, the unspoken tension in a video call, the buried meaning in a single I already knew the answer, but the waiting, that was the hardest part. That night I barely slept. My phone sat silent on the nightstand, dark except for the occasional spam notification. I didn't expect them to call, but I was waiting anyway, because the next morning was Monday, and Emily, my friend, my closest confidant in the department, would be in the room. She wasn't just a coworker, she'd been there for my first promotion, my worst flu, and the day I cried in the break room because a client called me his voice in a thank you letter. If anyone understood, it was Emily. She texted at 9:04 a.m. "He's here. Trident team walked in 2 minutes ago." Then silence. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at the screen, the blue chat bubble glowing like a lighthouse in the fog. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Still nothing. Then at 9:47 a.m., another message. "Something's wrong." My heart jumped. "What happened?" I typed back instantly. "No interpreter. They assumed someone else could handle it. Thomas Delqua isn't speaking, just sitting there. Alice looks furious." I gripped the phone tighter. Of course they thought someone could simply step in. Another bubble appeared. "Marcus tried using an app, I kid you not. Alice didn't even translate that, she just stared at him." My lips parted in disbelief, or maybe awe, I couldn't tell. Then came the final message. "Thomas hasn't signed anything, said 4 words through Alice. We will not stay long." I leaned back on the couch, phone resting in my lap. I exhaled for the first time. They were learning. They were learning the one thing I never needed to explain. You can't remove the voice and still expect the room to understand you. Tuesday morning felt like waiting for a storm that never arrived. I stayed in bed longer than usual, scrolling through the news, my inbox, LinkedIn, anything that might tell me how the meeting had ended. Part of me wanted chaos. Another part wanted the silence to mean regret. I even pictured Marcus sweating through his overpriced shirt, stumbling through an apology to Thomas Delqua. But by noon, nothing. No headlines, no viral posts, no frantic emails asking me to come back. Just quiet. That afternoon, my phone finally buzzed. "Emily, can I call you?" Seconds later, we were connected. I didn't even say hello, just "What happened?" She sighed. "Everything went fine." Silence. "Fine?" I echoed, trying not to let the disappointment show. "I mean, not at first," she said quickly. "When the Trident team arrived, Thomas looked around for you. He even asked Alice, made it pretty clear, 'Where's Mary?'" I closed my eyes. Of course he did. And I asked? "Lana stepped in," Emily said, her tone making it clear she wasn't impressed. "She told them you'd moved on, said we had new tools in place. She mentioned a translation software demo she'd seen online, claimed it was just as effective." I could see it so clearly, the rehearsed smile, the calculated tilt of her head, the way she probably said "just as effective" like it was backed by years of data instead of a tech blog headline. "Then what?" I asked, my voice barely there. "Thomas looked at Alice," Emily continued. "For a moment I thought they were going to walk, but they didn't. Alice nodded once and they stayed." I didn't speak. "They signed, Mary. Full renewal, even the expansion clause. It's done." Something inside me collapsed. Not because I wanted the company to fail without me, but because a small, foolish part of me had hoped I mattered more than a click and translate button. Emily must have heard my breathing shift. "They only signed because Alice stepped in," she added softly. "She did most of the talking. She guided everything. I think she was smoothing it over, saving face. It wasn't a victory, it was survival. But it didn't matter anymore. Not to Marcus, not to Lana. All they would see were signatures on a contract and a reason to move forward." "Thanks for telling me," I said quietly. "Are you okay?" Emily asked. "I will be." But the truth was, I wasn't. Because even if they'd managed to scrape by in one meeting, I knew what they didn't. They were building a future on a fault line, and when it fractured, when trust wore thin, when the tools failed to read a breath taken the wrong way, there would be no one left to interpret what had gone wrong. It began with a single phone call, then another, then 20 emails. By 7:13 a.m. on Wednesday, I was already staring at my phone, the screen pulsing with alerts like it had a heartbeat of its own. Emily's name flashed across the top. I hadn't even reached the kitchen yet. I answered instantly. "Everything's falling apart," she said. No greeting, no lead-in. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping the phone. What happened? There was a sharp intake of breath. The contract, the Trident deal, it's wrong. Wrong how? What's the clause issue? Multiple. She said profit-sharing terms were misstated. Oversight conditions were swapped. A couple of the limits on operational control were flipped, literally reversed in structure. The translation stripped out the soft conditional language and replaced it with direct affirmatives. I blinked. So the document says Trident has full decision-making control now. Yes, and a 3% performance bonus backdated to last quarter. I felt cold all over. That clause was never approved. I know. Emily's voice dropped to almost a whisper. They own us, Mary. For the next fiscal year, they can revise scope, timelines, even staffing, and it's legal. They signed it yesterday, and it's already been countersigned by the Trident team. They handed it to Alice after the meeting. I sat there, stunned. All the restraint I'd swallowed, all the things I hadn't said, and now this. What are they doing about it? I finally asked. Marcus is panicking. HR locked down the project folders. Legal is tearing through both language versions. Lana is saying she only used the tools she was instructed, and the CEO, he's trying to reach Trident. Good luck with that, I muttered. Yeah, he's already sent 2 meeting requests to their liaison team, she said. No response. He even tried calling Alice directly. Her assistant said she was unavailable until further notice. My hand trembled slightly as I lowered the phone, pressing it to my cheek. And then, Emily added after a pause, they asked for you. I froze. What? Trident? One of their directors. They asked if Mary Cooper would be attending the follow-up negotiation. I didn't say a word. Emily exhaled. And Lana told them you'd been let go. Silence on the line. Do you know what they said after that? She continued. Nothing. They just nodded politely, quietly, but the temperature in the room shifted like someone had slammed a door no one could see. I pictured it. Trident's executive team seated across the long glass table, faces calm but unreadable, the kind of silence that doesn't come from confusion, it comes from disappointment, from a decision already made. They're not angry, Mary, she said more softly. They're insulted. Of course they were. You don't build a relationship through a screen. You don't earn trust through a software interface. You don't replace 2 decades of cultural nuance with an API. They're giving us a chance to fix it, Emily said, but they haven't committed to anything. They haven't agreed to renegotiate. They haven't even promised another meeting. And Marcus wants a miracle, she added flatly. He's trying to push through a revised contract draft. He's calling in a certified interpreter to mediate a video call tomorrow. But between us, the partners have already gone quiet. That silence, I knew that silence. It wasn't a delay, it was a verdict. They'll cancel, I said softly. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Quietly, no headlines, just gone. Emily didn't argue. I think so too. There was a long pause between us, and in that pause I realized something else, something Marcus still hadn't grasped. They didn't lose the deal because of the contract. They lost it because of what the contract represented. They told our partners I wasn't necessary, that their voice, their culture, their expectations were just a line item. Trident didn't walk away because of the money. They walked away because no one listened. And when they finally do, no one will understand what they're saying. By Thursday morning, there was no more pretending. The air around the company had changed. Brittle, quiet, like the moment just before glass shatters. Emily texted me at 8:03 a.m., short and breathless. It's over. My chest tightened. What's over? I replied, already knowing the answer. She called instead of texting. They're pulling out, she said, not even waiting for me to say hello. Trident, the Japanese deal is dead. I tightened my grip on the edge of the kitchen counter. What happened? Emily's voice was trembling now. They sent a formal notice this morning, through legal. It's brutal. Professional, but brutal. Read it to me. She cleared her throat, then spoke slowly like she was reciting something carved in stone. After internal review and consultation with our board, we regret to inform you that Trident Group is terminating all pending collaboration with Grayson Manufacturing, effective immediately. This decision is based on what we deem an unprofessional handling of critical documentation, a lack of cultural respect, and a negligent attitude toward communication protocol during the negotiation process. I closed my eyes, but she wasn't done. The recent substitution of professional translation with automated tools during legal finalization without our consultation demonstrated a disregard for precision, transparency, and mutual respect. We can no longer proceed with a partner unwilling to prioritize diligence and integrity. Silence settled between us. Then, quietly, Emily added, "They named her." I looked up. "Lana?" "Yeah," she whispered. "They specifically mentioned her in an internal memo, said the SEO specialist, quote, displayed a dismissive attitude, lacked the qualifications to facilitate intercultural exchange, and failed to recognize the severity of her role." I released a slow breath. "And Marcus? He's in with the board, has been for hours. Legal says the company could lose up to $12 million in projected revenue and expansion credits. It's not just the Trident contract. Other clients are watching. Some of them were tied to that deal. Of course they were, because Trident wasn't just a client, they were a signal. When you lose their trust, the whole network starts to flicker. This could collapse an entire quarter's forecast. Emily said the CFO is panicking. PR is drafting a holding statement. And Lana? She's disappeared from the floor. I didn't feel victorious, not even satisfied. What I felt was colder. They didn't just lose a deal, they lost face. In Japan, that's not just bad business, it's unforgivable. They reduced a relationship years in the making to a botched PDF and a handful of empty buzzwords. They dismissed my work, my insight, my presence like it was optional, and now they were paying for it. But here's the cruelest part. I still could have saved them if they'd just listened. It was 2:41 p.m. when my phone rang. I was sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket with a notebook I hadn't opened in months. I'd been jotting ideas, freelance plans, maybe even the start of something new. I didn't recognize the number, but something about the timing made me answer. "Mary Cooper?" The voice was tight, polite, carefully practiced. "Yes, this is Jordan from the executive office. I'm calling on behalf of the leadership team. They've asked me to reach out directly." I let the silence stretch. "I believe you've heard what happened," he added. "I have." There was a long pause, then a breath. We'd like to formally invite you to return in your previous capacity, or potentially a higher role depending on your interest. The company deeply regrets the recent oversight, and on behalf of Mr. Bell and the executive committee, we want to apologize." I blinked slowly. "Oversight. We acknowledge that the decision to terminate your role was made hastily, and that reliance on automated systems was misguided." Misguided. That word so soft, so sanitized. "And what about Lana?" I asked evenly. There was a tight pause. "Miss Fallon is no longer handling international accounts. Disciplinary action is under review." I didn't react. "That's not what I asked." Another pause. "What would you require to return?" I stood, walked to the window, and stared at the city blinking beneath the gray clouds. "I want a formal apology," I said. "From her. Not a press release, not a line in a memo. I want her to say it to my face, that she disrespected me, underestimated me, and that her arrogance cost the company millions." Silence. Then the voice spoke softly. "And financial compensation?" I said, my voice steady. "Not a bonus, not a performance token. I want damages for wrongful termination and reputational harm. You fired me publicly, dismissed me like I was interchangeable, and allowed her to turn me into a punchline. You want me back? Then pay for what that did to me." He didn't respond for several long seconds. "We'll need to speak with legal," he said carefully. "You do that. May I ask one thing?" Sure. Would you consider returning if those conditions are met? I paused just long enough for the weight of my silence to land. If you can't understand why I deserve both, you never deserved me in the first place. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I went back to my notebook. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be acknowledged. I was defining my own worth. Period. Friday morning, the company pulled out all the stops. I hadn't planned to go in, but they asked, insisted, and something in me wanted to meet their eyes one last time. I wore black, not for drama, but for clarity. No color, no softness, just truth. When I stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, the entire office was assembled. A few heads turned, others pretended to be casual, like they hadn't spent the last week watching their walls collapse. Marcus stood off to the side, face pale, hands clasped. The CFO was there too, arms folded, lips tight. But it was Lana who stepped forward. She looked drained. The confidence was gone. She clutched a stack of papers like a shield. Her blazer was a little too crisp, like borrowed confidence. And in that moment, I saw it. She wasn't powerful, she was protected. And now that protection was gone. "Mary," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I owe you a very public apology." The room went dead silent. "I spoke out of turn," she said. "I undermined your work, I dismissed your expertise, and I said things, deeply disrespectful things, that came from ignorance and arrogance. I was wrong." Her voice cracked. "I believed tools could replace people, that speed mattered more than understanding. And because of that, I cost this company a partnership we spent a decade building." She looked up. "You were the bridge. I burned it. I'm sorry." A few murmurs moved through the room. Someone actually nodded. Marcus shifted like he wanted to speak, but I raised my hand. I met Lana's eyes. "Thank you," I said. "It takes something to say that out loud." She nodded, cautiously hopeful. "But I'm not coming back." Silence. The room tightened. "I don't owe this company another minute of my life," I continued, my voice calm. "When I was here, I was invisible until I wasn't. You saw my value only after you lost it, and now you want to repair your reputation using me." I turned slightly so everyone could hear. "I'm not a symbol. I'm not a recovery plan. I'm a professional who deserved respect before it cost you millions." I paused. "And just so you know, I've accepted another offer." Lana blinked. Marcus straightened. "The Japanese partners?" he asked. I smiled, small and certain. "They called me the day after they pulled out, said they wanted to work with someone who understood not just their language, but their values. I'll be overseeing their North American expansion." A gasp rippled through the room. A pen clattered to the floor. Lana's lips parted slightly. "I didn't walk away from this company," I added. "I walked towards something better." Then I left. No applause, no banners, no dramatic soundtrack. Just the sound of heels on tile, doors closing behind me, and a freedom I had earned, word by word, hand by hand. Later that night, I stood on the balcony of my new office, city lights stretching endlessly. This time, I wasn't the translator, I was the voice, and they would never forget it. Life has a strange way of teaching you who you really are, usually right after someone tries to erase you. And when I walked out of Grayson for the final time, I didn't look back, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need to. I'd already lived my proof. Every word I'd interpreted, every hand I'd shaken, every bridge I'd built, none of it required their validation anymore. Trident didn't just offer me a job, they offered me purpose. They named me Director of Global Cultural Strategy, which is a polished way of saying, we trust your voice and we want to amplify it. The first time I sat in a meeting with their Tokyo office as an equal, not an assistant, not an afterthought, I felt something shift inside me. Not pride, not revenge, just calm, like I had finally arrived where I was meant to be. I didn't just receive a new title, I built a team. I hired overlooked voices, language specialists, cultural advisors, women who'd been told they were too niche or too soft-spoken. Together, we shaped a space where fluency wasn't just about words, it was about respect. Sometimes people from Grayson reach out, quietly, carefully. A few even apologized. Some were simply curious. Do you miss it? Not even a pause. Not at all. Because here's the truth. Losing that job didn't break me. It showed me how strong I'd become without anyone noticing. It reminded me that your worth isn't something someone else can calculate on a spreadsheet or reduce to a line item. Your worth lives in what remains when you're gone. And when I left Grayson, I didn't leave silence. I left a message. Respect people before you need them, ask questions before you assume, and never ever confuse technology with trust. I still keep the small ceramic cup Thomas gave me, tucked safely on my new desk, not as a reminder of where I came from, but as a symbol of what happens when you choose to honor the language of people, not just profit. And every time someone new joins our team, I tell them the same thing. You're not here to be a cog. You're here to be a voice. And I mean it, because that's the legacy I'm building now, one fluent, fearless step at a time.